Hello and welcome. My name is Patty Murray, and I will be your host for today's Coping with Co-Parenting webinar presented by FamilyKind, a nonprofit organization that empowers children, parents, and couples before, during, and after separation or divorce. We are able to bring this webinar series to you free of charge due to the generosity of our sponsor, SoberLink. SoberLink supports accountability for sobriety and child safety, combining a breathalyzer with facial recognition and wireless connectivity for real-time results and reports. SoberLink's new Family Assistance Program offers alcohol monitoring free of charge to anyone who qualifies. By increasing our total reach in our mission of supporting families affected by alcohol abuse, this program will help continue to reduce litigation and foster peace of mind. In a moment, you will see a short poll on your screens. Please take some time to share your experiences with us, and we will report the results to you during the webinar. Also, feel free to send us questions using the Q&A feature and also your comments there as well, and we will get to as many as possible during a special Q&A session at the end. Now it is my pleasure to turn things over to our moderator, Ellen Tanner, who is FamilyKind's Director of Program Development. Ellen?
Thank you, Patty. Tonight we're going to have a conversation that seeks to break down the barrier of discussing the challenging topic, racism. It's each individual's point of view tonight who will be speaking. Something said may be considered controversial. Overall, though, we're learning from one another, healing, and sharing our visions for the future, so that one day we and future generations can live in a country that fulfills its goal of equality and justice for all. In this session of our two-part webinar series, we will each share our experiences with racism, prejudice, and conversations that we've had with our parents, our co-parents, and our children. In our part two of this two-session webinar, we will explore the conversations we've had specifically about the Black Lives Matter during the month. We will be encouraging you all to also have conversations during the month and join us on August 3rd when we can explore that a little bit deeper. I'd like to introduce my wonderful panelists with you. Each person is a parenting educator as well as a co-parent. My panelists are Rocky and Carmen, and Gerald and Leslie. Leslie is the executive director and founder of FamilyKind, as well as a parent educator, and also just an inspiration to us all. I'm going to turn it over to Leslie Friedland, who will start with a poem. We like to start our webinars with poems. This one is A Caged Bird by Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou is a beloved author, and this is a well-known and important poem that resonates with many of us. Leslie, I turn it to you.
Thank you, Ellen. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream to the current ends and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade wind soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams, his shadow shouts on a nightmare scream, his wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, where the caged bird sings of freedom.
Thank you, Leslie. That poem certainly sets the stage for our discussion.
Mhm.
Before we talk about what our panelists want to share, let's see what our parents who are joining us today said. It looks like 36% of our listeners have spoken with their co-parent about racism and how they want to talk to their child about it. But 64% have not yet done it. And we're hoping that with the skills that you're going to hear about tonight and some examples that you'll be able to embrace this opportunity with what's going on. We also haven't spoken, I see 73% of our children haven't had their parents speak with them about racism yet. So again, with everything that's going on, we hope that tonight you'll hear some things that might empower you to be able to speak with your children about racism. I misread that. 73% have said yes, and 23% said no. Forgive me, I apologize. Well done, parents, that's great. So racism they're important conversations to have, whether you're married, divorced, separated, never married, or remarried, and to discuss the topic of racism with your co-parent and what messages you want to convey to your children. Ideally, we would like parents to be on the same page and share the same views about various cultures and races, but that isn't always possible. Whether this is the case or you're on the same page, consider communication skills to help the conversation be as effective as possible. We have a variety of skills that we teach in our parenting classes, and we're going to quickly review some of them right now in our next slide. One of them is iMessages, and I'm going to circle back to that in a moment. Another one that's so important is reflective listening, or some people call it active listening, where you tell the person what you hear them saying in terms of their feeling and their fact and their feeling. Sounds like you're feeling stressed about the racist attitudes that you're coming across in people. Or you might say, let me see if I have this right. What I'm hearing you say is, and then you tell them what you've heard. Another skill is to stop, look, and listen. Having conversations about racism can be challenging. And what we want to do is pause and use some time to think about what we want to say so we get to be the best version of ourselves. iMessages, those are the ones that are really instrumental in helping conversations be more effective, even when you don't always agree. Here's a couple of examples of an iMessage that one co-parent might say to the other co-parent. I feel motivated to speak with our child about racism because this is an important topic for them to hear things from their parents, not only what's on the news or from other people. Can we agree that we will discuss what we want our children to know, and that since this isn't a one-time conversation, that we will communicate with each other whenever the topic comes up with our child? So that followed the formula of I feel, when, because, can we? You may not want to follow that exact formula. It might sound more like it's important that our child hear from us about our views about racism and what we expect their views to be. The times are changing and they are growing up during this important movement. I'd appreciate it if we could agree to discuss what each of us wants to tell our child and how we are going to do that. And since this won't be a one-time conversation, can we stay in touch when we do discuss things with our child about racism historically and presently? So those are some examples. Now each panelist tonight is going to present their experiences, and then I will sum up what I've heard them say and ask any clarifying questions. I'm going to go first though. My experience is different from the other panelists. I grew up in a family that experienced anti-Semitism after World War II, so much so that my dad had to change the family name so he could get a job. Anti-Semitism is a form that's different from racism, but it is a form of prejudice and discrimination. However, after one generation later, my generation, it has been greatly reduced, although it's not totally gone. Now this gives me hope that we can make a huge difference now and for the future generations with constructive efforts by all of us to tackle racism. Even though my family had many conversations about equality for all people, none were specifically about racism. Well, let's hear how our other panelists have experienced their conversations. Leslie, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'll just first say it's so nice to be here with my panelists. I have such respect for all of you, and with the parents who are Zooming in with us today. Thank you. So my siblings and I were raised by very progressive parents. We realized we had every advantage in the world, and it was up to us to do what we could for others. Both my parents did good works. Martin Luther King Jr. was a great hero in our household, and the concept of integrity was our family motto. So I knew that when I married, my husband would have to share these values, and gratefully, we shared the same vision throughout our 30 years of marriage. My husband and I both committed to public service careers and raised our two sons from the point of view of a white ally to the Black Lives Matter movement. We made it a point to send our children to integrated public schools, which is not always so easy to find because even as progressive as New York City is, the schools are often segregated. And we know that people must live and learn together for a society to be truly integrated. I'm so happy to say that our young adult children share our vision in the world. One of them works part-time as a nurse's assistant at a hospital in an underserved community, and one is entering his first year at a fully public interest law school.
Thank you, Leslie. So what I heard from you, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the behavior that your parents modeled for you spilled over to not just your generation, but now the next generation, your children. And also that it informed your decision about who you would marry and how you would raise your children, that you'd have to both be on the same page about the messages that you gave your children about being of service and of equality and justice for all. So that's very impressive, and I thank you so much for sharing that. And I also wanted to reflect on what you said about choosing what school your children went to and how important that was, that you specifically sought out in New York, even with difficulty, being there to find an educational opportunity that was diverse in its population and in its curriculum and the lessons that your children would learn outside the home, not just what they would learn inside the home.
Yes, Ellen, you got it right on point. That's basically what I was saying. Thank you.
You're entirely welcome. Carmen, I'd like to hear from you if you wouldn't mind.
Yes. So I was raised very Catholic, and my father and my mother both instilled in us not to judge people by their skin color, to always judge people by their character and their qualities. And that is the same values that I instilled in my children. I sit down with them and I have that conversation about racism. Although I have never experienced racism personally, neither have my children, because I do talk to them about it. But my daughter did mention to me that she was part of the Black Lives Movement protests in her school because that she did witness racism among her friends. And she says, you never shy away from it. You have to support your friends and what's right. And because of that, she helped me see that there is racism, something that I never really experienced. So just talking to them and understanding is the way to communicate and start that whole world of communication and awareness that it does exist. And I was grateful for that.
So Carmen, what I heard you say was that your daughter was raised with the same values that you were raised with. But in addition, you also raised her with the belief that you stand up for when you see injustice. And I'm sure that her ability to come and speak with you about it helps give her the strength that she needs to do it in a constructive way and in a meaningful way. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure you're very proud of your daughter.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So that was Carmen Rios, who's married to Rocky Bonilla. So Rocky, would you like to share?
Yes. Good evening, panelists. Good evening, parents. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rocky, and basically, I could say that me and Carmen were raised basically the same way, because my parents instilled in me that yes, we are different colors, we are different races, but that's at the end of the day, we're all God's children. And I went to a private school, and I'll always remember this as how long it's been. I'll always remember being at the top of the stairs, going to the cafeteria. And you know, in the back in the old days, that you had to line up to go down the stairs. And I'll always try to remember, how did I get to the bottom of the stairs if I didn't take a step? And as I got older, I look back, and it was because I was the only Puerto Rican in the class. And I came to the conclusion that I was being singled out. But I didn't let that bother me per se, because I've always said we're all God's children. We're all one. And raising our kids, I would tell them, you know, it did happen to me. I was a victim. But I didn't let that, I would say, hinder on me. So it's always important to have that conversation with your children. And it's not only one conversation, it's many conversations, because what's important to me and to Carmen and to parents in general is, how do our children feel? There's a lot of stuff going out there right now. How do our children feel?
Mm.
And that's the basis that we instill in our kids, because it was instilled on us.
Thank you,
And
Rocky. Oh, I'm sorry.
it's okay.
It was
Yeah.
done.
Rocky, our sharing is so beautiful for us to all hear, that you too were raised with the idea to see children as God's children, not as a color. And even though you personally experienced racism and your co-parent and wife did not, you both thought it was important enough to talk about racism and racist attacks from how it made you feel, and also that you can ask your children about how they feel, because those are very important questions to ask. And what do they believe, and what do they think, and is that fair? And I appreciate, you sharing personally something that I'm sure was very difficult to experience. And I appreciate how you turn that around to be a lesson and an opportunity to share that with your children. I think many of us do need to share from our personal experiences, which is why we started this 2-session webinar talking about our personal experiences. So Rocky, thank you. And I'm now going to ask Gerald Cannon, another parenting educator with FamilyKind, to speak with us about his experiences.
Good evening, one and all, and blessings. Thank you. My challenges come on a couple of different fronts. One being the obvious, but that's that at this particular point at 55 50 going on 55 years old, I pretty much kind of navigated. But my challenge now is having a 15-year-old. and not only having a 15-year-old, but him living in a separate household. Yes, I'm currently co-parenting, and you know, I have to say, I have to go on the record that you know, it's the tools that we teach here at FamilyKind that are practiced in my everyday life with my co-parent that are affording me the success that I'm having with my co-parent and my son. I said that to say this. There are challenges, and my challenge was finding the verbiage to be able to share with him what's going on. The other challenge is that the environment that he is in isn't one that I agree with. But that's not the situation. You know, it's not for me to condemn what goes on at that environment. So I don't. I use it to find out how he feels about it. So I find myself using the iMessages with my co-parent and using the active listening and stop, look, and listen with him, because he is very valid, or he's going through something, and then I need to hear what he's going through, seeing that he spends most of his time with his mother. So I need to catch up with him, asking him those questions, and also listening, watching, and see how he reacts to certain things, so I can address them. So those are my challenges. And there was the verbiage. I recently came across something saying that said that it's not black against white, it is us against racism. And that kind of surmised it so very well, because you know, I don't want my son to, when he sees a Caucasian face or a face of a different color, thinking that these people are out to get me or they're against me. But understand that there is a type of behavior or learned behavior that's out there that's not conducive to him. That's what I want him to understand, and that there are good people out there, and those are the people that you want to learn how to gravitate to. And so those are the skills that I'm trying to develop in him, and so that he's not fearful of sometimes if he sees a Caucasian face or somebody even in a police uniform. Again, there are good people out there, and that's what we want him to understand, to be able to properly filter. That's the word I'm looking for, actually, being able to filter, to be able to understand that it's not black against white. It's us against racism, and recognize what that looks like, what it smells like, what it sounds like, and be able to address it from that point of view. So it's challenging, yes, but it has its rewards. It really does. And sitting amongst colleagues here, I wish that we could foster this loving environment. We all work together, and when we share these tools and we practice these tools and we teach these tools, and it works. It works. And and so in that regard, I say thank you. So, but yes, there are the challenges, and I've been able to navigate them.
Gerald, you hit on so many wonderful points that I'd like to underscore some of them, if you don't mind. One being that what goes on in your house is not often the same as what goes on in your co-parent's home. And even though your son spends a lot of time there, you learn to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, to be able to have conversations, even if they're uncomfortable, both with your co-parent and with your child, so that you can be on the same page, not necessarily all in agreement, but at least on the same page. And the other point that you highlighted was that you have a vision of what you want your son to know, and to seek out allies and not be filled with hate and revenge. But how do we change so that we don't have racism anymore? And I applaud you and thank you. I want to thank everybody who's had the opportunity to hear from all of our panelists. I know we're likely going to, or could possibly go over a little bit of time. We hope that everybody will stay with us, because we do want to hear from some of our parents now and participants. So Patty, is there anybody that has asked a question or made a comment that you'd like to share with all of us?
Yeah, we've gotten a few comments that have come in, and again, feel free to use the Q&A to send in your comments as well as your questions. And a couple of people have been using the chat as well. We have one person who's saying that she really appreciated your comment, Gerald, about us against racism. So she really liked that. And then another parent is saying that, and she sent in a few, so I'm going to condense them a little bit, but that she and her daughter had lived, I guess she and her daughter had lived in Arizona for 13 years, and now they're back in New York. But while her daughter was in Arizona, she experienced racism. But she thanked her mom when she got home, and she said, you know, thanks for not teaching me, and this is her words, the black and white thing. It made a difference in her life and her views. And what the mother did was she modeled by example, that she had all different kinds of friends, and she's always had them and always will. And so I thought those were some lovely sentiments.
Thank you. And this conversation that we're having today is so well reflected in our participants' comments and our panelists' comments that we come from different experiences and different viewpoints, and we all are waking up to how our past is informing our present and how our present can inform the future. So I thank everybody for participating. I have a challenge that I'd like to share with everybody, which is for the panelists and our host and all of our listeners. Let's use the coming month to have some effective, meaningful conversations about the Black Lives Matters movement. Taking on these conversations and using the skills that we have modeled tonight, we reviewed them with you tonight. Please use those skills and let's move this wheel forward. We invite you to join us next month on August 3rd at 8 o'clock. And let us know how things are progressing with you, and we'll let you know how things are progressing with us. Patty, would you like to add anything before we wrap it up?
No, I was just looking for any last minute comments. I'm not seeing that. So I can do the wrap if you like.
Sure.
Great. Well, again, thank you everybody for coming tonight and for sharing your thoughts and your experiences. Thank you to the attendees, of course, as well as our panelists. And I'd also like to thank again our sponsor SoberLink for supporting FamilyKind and our educational programming. In addition to sponsors, FamilyKind also relies on the support of parents like yourselves. If you would like to make a donation so we can continue to offer free educational programming, please feel free to visit FamilyKind.org. Any amount is welcome. And we look forward to seeing you next month for part 2 of this webinar. Until then, be well and good night.
And good night to all our participants.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.